Just a janitor's daughter. The building was quiet the way only office towers are after midnight. Humming vents, the occasional elevator ding, and the hush of busy lives paused until morning. The lights on the 27th floor had been dimmed, casting long shadows over glass walls and gleaming marble. Alina Carter moved like muscle memory through it all. She held a cleaning cloth in one hand, a small bottle of solution in the other, wiping down conference room windows with steady, practiced rhythm. Her janitor badge swung gently around her neck, partially obscured by her oversized hoodie, the one that used to be her mom's back when times were just slightly better. Down the hall, her mother Rosa pushed the vacuum in slow lines across the carpet, face focused, back stiff from decades of night shifts. Rosa didn't talk much while working. She believed silence was safer, less likely to draw attention, less likely to make mistakes. They cleaned and they left. That was the rule. But that night, something broke the pattern. Alina paused at the copy room, reaching to empty the shredder bin, when she noticed a folder left on the tray. Nothing unusual. People forget things. But this one was marked in red. Confidential. Final draft. Merger agreement. She shouldn't have touched it. She knew better. Yet her fingers moved before she told them to. She opened the folder just slightly, eyes scanning the top of the first page. Clause 14C. In the event of liability post-merger, the acquiring firm assumes full exposure, including... She frowned. Even with her limited understanding, something about the language sounded off. It was polished, legal, but tucked in a way that made it easy to miss. Her eyes darted further down the page, subparagraphs, conditional phrases, a shifting of responsibility. She didn't fully grasp the mechanics, but something in her gut, the same instinct that warned her when someone was lying or when her mother needed help but wouldn't say so, told her something was wrong. She placed the folder back exactly as she found it, heart thudding. The copier light flickered once as if in silent witness. That night, lying in the small fold-out bed beside her mother's room, Alina stared at the ceiling. She couldn't sleep, couldn't scroll mindlessly like the other girls at school. She didn't even have a phone with apps. What she did have was a brain full of documentary facts, late-night sessions with her grandfather watching American Greed, reading financial newspapers with a flashlight under the covers, and writing essays with titles like What Brought Down Enron and Why It Still Matters. She wasn't a genius. She just noticed things, like how the maintenance staff had their own separate bathroom, or how no one ever made eye contact with her mother in the elevator, or how a clause in a contract hidden like a needle in a haystack could look harmless until someone signed it and everything fell apart. At breakfast, she tried to mention it. "Mom," she said gently, "do you think it's okay for a company to absorb liability from a merger?" Her mother barely looked up from her eggs. "What kind of question is that? I mean, what if the deal goes bad and they end up taking the fall?" Rosa gave her the kind of look mothers give when they're too tired to argue but too alert to ignore. "You didn't go through their paperwork, did you?" "No," Alina lied. "Just a hypothetical." "Well, leave the hypotheticals to them, Mia. We're here to clean, not to comment." That should have been the end of it, but Alina couldn't unsee what she'd seen. The next day, Rosa got called in for an emergency shift, something about a client walkthrough happening early, and Alina went along, slipping on her hoodie and ID again. The offices were already buzzing with suits and high heels by the time they reached the 27th floor. Through the glass wall of the conference room, Alina could see him, Richard Langston, CEO of Langston Capital, hair silvering at the sides, pen in hand, sitting across from Marcus Bell, a man with a smile too smooth to be trustworthy. The contract was laid open before him. Alina's feet moved again without permission. She pushed open the door, not aggressively, just enough to be seen, to be heard. "Excuse me," she said, voice steadier than she expected, "but this clause, it's a trap." The room fell utterly silent. Every head turned, a few jaws slackened. Someone whispered, "Who let the janitor's kid in here?" Richard Langston blinked, still holding his pen mid-air. Alina didn't step back. She pointed at the document. Page 14, Section C. The language flips post-merger liability entirely to your company. If there's a fraud lawsuit or default later, you take all the heat. A low, awkward chuckle slipped from Marcus Bell's mouth. "What are you talking about?" But Richard didn't laugh. He looked at her, really looked, and didn't move the pen. If your heart skipped a beat just now, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. At Heart Touch Stories, we believe in giving voice to the ones no one sees, because sometimes they're the only ones telling the truth. She shouldn't even be here. For a moment, no one in the boardroom moved. The tension thickened like fog on a cold river. Richard Langston's pen hovered mid-air, the tip just inches from the signature line that would tie his company's future to a merger worth nearly $500 million. Alina stood barely inside the doorway, still clutching the edge of her hoodie sleeve. She had spoken calmly, but the air she left behind was charged. Across the room, Eleanor Langston's face registered mild amusement. She gave a half laugh, half sigh, the kind women of high society often use when dismissing something inconvenient. "Oh, come on, Richard," she said, voice airy. "She's the janitor's daughter." There was a ripple of polite chuckles around the table. One young executive cleared his throat. Another leaned forward to glance at the contract. Marcus Bell smiled, not a kind smile, not even a patient one. It was the kind of smile people wear when they believe they've already won. "She's confused," he said smoothly. "Clause 14C is boilerplate language, standard indemnity coverage." But Alina didn't flinch. She pointed again, her voice unwavering. "It's not boilerplate. It's deliberately misworded. The subparagraph loops responsibility onto Langston Capital, not Bell Holdings. If anything goes wrong, if there's legal fallout, you take the hit. They walk clean." Someone in a sleek suit muttered, "Why is she even talking?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She shouldn't even be here. That's when Richard slowly set down the pen. He didn't say a word. He just looked at Alina with something more than curiosity. A flicker of doubt, of recognition. Security arrived moments later. A young man in uniform stepped forward and said gently, "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Alina didn't resist. She nodded once, glanced at the contract one last time, and let herself be guided out. The glass door closed behind her with a soft but definitive click. Downstairs, Rosa Carter was scrubbing a coffee stain from a marble countertop when she saw her daughter being escorted out by security. Her heart dropped. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed, rushing toward her. "Nothing bad, I just spoke up." "Spoke up?" Rosa hissed, pulling her aside near the loading bay. "What did you say?" "I told them the contract was wrong." "Oh my God, Alina." Rosa dropped her cloth. "You want them to fire me? Do you know how many years I've worked this job to keep a roof over our heads?" "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did. You just didn't think." Alina swallowed hard. "I couldn't stay quiet. It was wrong." Her mother stared at her for a long beat. "So now you're the moral compass of corporate America?" Alina looked down. The wind from the alley nipped at her ankles. Back upstairs, the mood had shifted. Richard Langston sat back in his chair, fingers pressed together near his chin. The room was trying to recover, but something had been unsettled. Eleanor leaned in, her tone brisk. "She's a kid, Richard. Don't let this shake your judgment." "I'm not shaken," he said quietly. "Just curious." She probably misunderstood what she saw. Or she didn't. Eleanor exhaled and leaned back, folding her arms. "You trust the word of a teenager with a mop over your own legal team?" Richard didn't answer. Instead, he stood and slid the unsigned contract toward the center of the table. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," he said. "I need to reread this with fresh eyes." Marcus Bell's jaw twitched slightly. His signature smile faltered just for a second. That night, in the quiet of his home office, Richard Langston sat with a steaming mug of coffee and a red pen in hand. He turned to page 14, clause 14C, subparagraph 3. And there it was. He read it once, then again, then a third time, out loud, as if trying to catch it lying. The language was standard, until it wasn't. Buried beneath jargon was a transfer of indemnity that wasn't protective. It was damning. It placed his firm as the legal scapegoat if the merger failed, if lawsuits arose, if undisclosed liabilities emerged. He leaned back, stunned. How had he missed it? How had his legal team missed it? But a 16-year-old girl with scuffed sneakers and a borrowed hoodie had not. Across the city, Alina lay awake again, staring at the cracked ceiling of their two-bedroom apartment. Her mom hadn't said a word to her since dinner. The silence wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disappointed. Alina thought of that boardroom, The looks, the judgment, the disbelief. She wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. She was trying to protect something, someone. And yet, all anyone saw was the badge around her neck, just a janitor's daughter. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of the Sterling Club downtown, a different conversation was taking place. Eleanor Langston sat across from Marcus Bell in a reserved corner booth, their champagne glasses untouched. The air around them smelled of ambition and artificial orchids. Marcus handed her a small silver flash drive. Eleanor took it without hesitation. "It's all there," he said, swirling his glass. "Drafts, timelines, legal language your husband won't catch." "He's smarter than you think," she said flatly. "He signed the prenup," Marcus replied with a smirk. "He'll sign this too." Eleanor didn't laugh. She simply slipped the flash drive into her purse and looked out over the glittering city skyline. "Let's just make sure he does," she said. Back at the Langston residence, Richard pulled out an old file. Notes from a terminated deal 2 years ago. One name caught his eye. Bell Holdings. Another clause, another similarity. His gut turned. It wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a pattern, and Alina Carter had seen it before he ever did. He rubbed his temple and closed the folder. Then, as if on instinct, he opened his laptop and typed her name. She didn't even have a LinkedIn, just a school article she'd written 2 years ago. The Fall of Corporate Empires, a teen's perspective on greed. He leaned back slowly. Maybe she wasn't just the janitor's daughter. Maybe she was the first person in that entire building who still knew how to see clearly. With the dirt they thought she wouldn't see. The email came without a name. No subject line, no greeting. Just a message. "You saw it too." Alina blinked at the screen in her school's computer lab. It was early Saturday morning, the only time the library was quiet enough to think. She'd snuck in under the radar, telling the custodian she needed to finish a class report. It wasn't exactly a lie. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she replied cautiously, "Who are you?" The answer came within minutes. "Daniel Reese. I used to work in your building, legal compliance. I saw what you saw 2 years ago. I tried to speak up. I was reassigned, then let go. What they buried is deeper than you know. If you're willing to listen, I'll show you." Attached was a secure link to a private drive and a phone number with no photo ID. Alina's heart pounded. She waited until she got home to open the link. In the quiet of their apartment, with the blinds drawn and her mom still at the grocery store, Alina clicked through folder after folder of scanned documents, email screenshots, and internal memos, contracts, tax records, wire transfers, all with one name surfacing again and again: Marcus Bell. And next to his in the authorization trails, Eleanor Langston. Even Alina, without a law degree, could see the patterns. Each merger used the same template, the fine print shifting liability to the acquiring firm. Months later, that firm would collapse under legal costs or hidden debt. Bell's company always walked away untouched, wealthier, bolder, and clean on paper. But now there was a breadcrumb trail, and Alina was following it. When Rosa got home, she found her daughter hunched over the kitchen table with pages spread out like puzzle pieces. Her expression wasn't that of a curious teen. It was something older, weightier. "You're not seriously still digging into this, are you?" Rosa asked, setting down the grocery bags. Alina looked up. "I have to. It's bigger than I thought. It wasn't just one deal. He's done this before. 3 companies, all collapsed within 6 months of merging." Rosa sighed heavily. "Mia, you are 16. This isn't your world." "It became mine," Alina said, "the second I saw it and knew what would happen if no one stopped it." Rosa didn't respond. She just began unpacking silently, but her hands shook slightly as she placed the milk in the fridge. Later that week, the retaliation began. Alina was pulled into the principal's office at school. "We've received concerns about your behavior," the administrator said, eyes guarded. "There's been a complaint filed, alleging you're emotionally disruptive, unstable." Alina's stomach twisted. "I haven't even been to school this week." "Well," he replied, avoiding her gaze, "sometimes perception becomes reality." At home, Rosa found an envelope on their doorstep with no return address. Inside was a single note: "You're making them nervous. Keep quiet if you know what's good for you." That night, Rosa was taken off her regular cleaning floor. Reassigned, they said, but her key card no longer worked for the executive suites. And still, Alina didn't stop. "If I don't stand for what's right," she told her mother softly, "they'll keep stepping on people like us, people who work in silence, who are never seen." Across town, Richard Langston sat at the corner of a sleek downtown bar, nursing a cup of black coffee he had no intention of finishing. The ice in his glass water had long melted. He wasn't here for drinks. He was watching. Through a pane of frosted glass, he saw them. Eleanor and Marcus Bell. They were seated in a booth, far too close, far too casual. Eleanor's manicured hand rested lightly on Marcus's wrist as he passed her a small device, a flash drive, again. Richard's stomach turned. Something primal, bitter, and undeniable twisted inside him. He stepped out into the cold night and called the one person he still trusted. A friend of a friend. A name he'd heard whispered among boardrooms when things went south and reputations were at stake. Her name was Olivia Tran, a former prosecutor, now a civil rights attorney. She didn't wear designer suits or travel with an entourage, but she had a reputation for making giants fall, quietly, thoroughly, and without regret. They met the next morning in the back room of a closed courthouse. "I need help," Richard said without preamble. "Not just for me, for a girl who saw what none of us did." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You're a CEO, and you're telling me your company was saved by a teenager?" She's 16, no degree, no office, but she caught what a dozen lawyers missed or ignored. "What do you want from me?" Olivia asked. "I need to protect her," Richard replied, "and I need to know how deep this goes." Olivia nodded once. "Then let's start digging." Alina kept meeting with Daniel Reese in secret. They never met in person, only phone calls, encrypted messages, and packages left in library drop boxes. Daniel had been careful. He'd been burned before. One folder arrived on a Wednesday afternoon with a sticky note. "Follow the offshore trail. Start with Cayman." Alina stayed up for hours tracing names. One kept resurfacing, EL Holdings. At first, she didn't realize what it meant. Then she saw the address linked to the trust, Eleanor Langston's childhood home. She felt her throat tighten. Rosa sat beside her, rubbing her temples. "She's not just clueless," Alina whispered. "She's in it." That night, another envelope came, but this time it didn't come to the doorstep. It was handed to Rosa at work by a man she didn't recognize. Inside, a photo of Alina sitting in the school library, nothing else, just a threat in picture form. Richard had seen enough. He called Alina personally, asking to meet her somewhere safe. They chose the library where she first opened the email. He arrived with Olivia Tran, legal pad in hand. He didn't shake her hand like a CEO. He approached her like a man waking up from a long sleep. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. Alina didn't smile. "Then let's get the truth out before someone else disappears." They sat for hours in a quiet study room, piecing together Daniel's documents, screenshots, audit trails, and contract language. Olivia connected the dots. "This is fraud, but worse, it's coordinated. And if your wife's signature is on those offshore transfers—" "It is," Richard said. "I found them." "Then we've got more than a bad deal," Olivia said. "We've got a conspiracy." Later that evening, Rosa and Alina sat by the window, watching the wind dance through the city streets below. "You know," Rosa said softly, "when you were little, you used to ask me why I always cleaned the windows last." Alina turned to her. "Because you said they were the most important." "Not because they were dirtier," Rosa said, "but because people always look out of them. It's the only time they notice if they're cloudy." Alina looked down at the folder in her lap. "They're going to try to make this cloudy, Mama, but I won't let them." Her mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "I didn't raise you to be fearless," she said, "but I did raise you to be clear. Truth has no uniform." The motion was filed quietly. No press, no reporters, just a single visit to the federal courthouse and a sealed document handed to the clerk. Olivia Tran didn't believe in loud entrances. She believed in precision. And on that day, she walked out with a whistleblower protection order in her coat pocket and the full weight of the law beginning to tilt in their favor. Alina Carter was now officially more than a voice in the dark. She was a witness, but she didn't feel like one, not yet. At home, she still helped her mother fold laundry, still made 2 mugs of peppermint tea every night, and still triple-checked that the locks were fastened before bed. But there was something different in her eyes. The quiet intensity of someone who had seen something no one wanted her to see and refused to look away. Meanwhile, Langston Capital prepared for its annual Foundation Gala, a black tie affair hosted in the towering Grand Meridian Ballroom. This year, the guest list included socialites, donors, and some of the very people who had stood in that boardroom only weeks earlier, ready to sign away the company's soul. Eleanor Langston arrived early, dressed in navy silk, her expression unreadable. Richard Langston arrived late, but he came with purpose. When the time came for his welcome remarks, he stepped onto the stage beneath golden chandeliers and cleared his throat. The microphone adjusted with a soft crackle. "Before we begin tonight's celebration," he said, "I'd like to speak to you not as a CEO, but as a man who forgot how to listen." A hush fell over the crowd. Months ago, we entered a merger negotiation, one that promised great financial reward. What we didn't see was the cost, not in dollars, but in dignity. He scanned the crowd. His eyes briefly landed on Eleanor, who remained perfectly still. "I've since suspended that merger," he continued, "because someone we never invited to the table, saw what none of us did. And while I won't name her tonight, I will say this: she reminded me of the difference between a good deal and a just one." Polite applause followed. Some clapped out of obligation, others because they felt the shift in the room. Up in a hotel suite 2 floors above, Marcus Bell watched the live feed on a private screen. His glass of scotch remained untouched. "We've got a problem," he muttered. Eleanor stood beside him, arms crossed. "No," she said, "we've got a child with a microphone. And children get nervous." But Alina wasn't nervous. She was prepared. She'd already backed up every file Daniel Reese had sent. She stored them on encrypted drives, printed duplicates, and even sent a copy to Olivia's contact at the Justice Department. So when someone tried to delete Daniel's cloud server the next day, it didn't matter. The truth had already found too many doors. A week later, a formal inquiry was launched. Alina received the official subpoena while sitting in her school's front office. The secretary looked at her like she was radioactive. Other students whispered in the hallway. Some avoided her. A few called her brave, others called her a traitor. But Alina kept walking, because this wasn't about popularity. It was about clarity. The hearing was held in a federal courtroom downtown. The wood-paneled walls and heavy velvet curtains gave the space a kind of theater. But what happened there was not for show. It was justice, unfolding slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. Eleanor Langston and Marcus Bell sat at the defense table, flanked by sharp-suited attorneys. They looked calm, collected. But Richard Langston sat on the other side of the aisle, his tie slightly loose, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and resolve. Alina sat in the second row behind Olivia, holding a small notebook in her lap. Her mother sat beside her, hand gently covering hers. When Olivia stood, the courtroom stilled. "Your Honor," she said, "we call Miss Alina Carter to the stand." There was a rustle of papers, a few raised eyebrows. The judge motioned for her to approach. Alina walked slowly, chin high, each step echoing off the marble floor. She took the oath with a steady voice, then sat. Olivia stepped forward. "Miss Carter, can you tell the court how you came across the merger documents in question?" Alina nodded. "I was cleaning the 27th floor with my mother. I found a folder left in a copy tray. It said, 'Confidential.' I didn't touch it, I just looked." "And what did you notice?" "There was a clause, buried deeper, that transferred all liability to Langston Capital. If something went wrong, the company would take the full legal hit. You're 16, no formal training. Why did that clause stand out to you?" Alina glanced toward the defense table, then back at the jury. "Because just because I clean your floors doesn't mean I don't see the dirt." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the judge leaned back slightly. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Marcus's face remained blank, but his fingers drummed the table. Alina continued. "I didn't understand all the legal terms, but I understood the pattern. I'd seen enough in the files Mr. Reese sent me. 3 other companies, same tactic, same outcome." "And what happened when you spoke up?" Olivia asked. "I was escorted out. My mother almost lost her job. We were threatened. But I didn't stop." There was a pause. Olivia nodded. "No further questions." The defense lawyer rose for cross-examination, but his questions were blunt, ineffective. Alina's answers remained calm, precise. When it was over, she stepped down and returned to her seat, to a long, quiet embrace from her mother. Then came Richard Langston's turn. He testified to what he saw, what he overlooked, and how a girl with no title saved his company from ruin. When asked what made him believe her, he said simply, "My gut said she was right. But more than that, she remembered something we all forgot, that integrity doesn't depend on your job title." Then Olivia played the audio. Eleanor's voice filled the courtroom. "He won't question it if I push hard enough. And if he does, we remind him what he has to lose." There was no reaction from Eleanor, but her hands folded tightly in her lap, and for the first time, her gaze dropped to the floor. When Olivia asked why she did it, Eleanor's voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. "I just wanted the deal done before he could question it." And when Alina exposed it, "I wanted her gone," she said, "because she saw everything I worked so hard to keep hidden." The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous: guilty on conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, guilty on falsifying financial documents, guilty on obstruction and misuse of company funds. Clara Langston and Marcus Bell were both sentenced to 10 years in federal prison with no chance of parole for the first 7. Alina didn't cheer, she didn't cry. She simply closed her notebook, stood beside Olivia and her mother, and walked out of the courtroom with quiet grace. She never wanted revenge, she only wanted the truth to come out. The foundation she rebuilt weeks had passed since the verdict. Langston Capital didn't collapse, it restructured. And at the heart of that transformation was a single announcement made at a press conference inside the very building Alina once cleaned. "We are proud to launch the Alina Carter Fellowship, a scholarship for young minds with the courage to speak up even when no one's listening." Richard Langston stood at the podium, but he wasn't the center of attention. Not that day. Alina stood beside him, blazer slightly too big, white blouse pressed just right, and a look in her eyes that silenced the room more than any speech ever could. Later, in the privacy of his office, Richard handed her a slim envelope, inside an offer of full mentorship, a paid internship, and a formal letter of acceptance from Columbia University. "You've earned more than that," he said. "You've earned a seat at any table you want." Alina didn't cry. She just nodded, that same quiet fire behind her eyes. Across state lines, Eleanor Langston walked through the cold gates of a federal detention center. No cameras followed, no headlines marked her arrival. She said nothing, and the world didn't ask. That night, Alina and her mother sat on the fire escape of their apartment, the city pulsing softly beneath them. The metal was cold against their legs, but the tea in their hands was warm. Rosa watched the skyline for a long time before speaking. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Alina took a slow sip, then smiled. "Only that I didn't speak sooner." Below, headlights passed. Distant music floated up from an open window. For the first time in a long time, the air felt light. But across the street, in a parked car wrapped in shadow, a figure watched. They typed a message into a burner phone. "She's still a kid, but she's already turning the tide," and hit send. The camera pans slowly up to the glittering skyline as the city exhales and braces. Because truth doesn't fade, it builds, it echoes, and sometimes it wears borrowed sneakers. Truth doesn't wear a suit, sometimes it wears borrowed sneakers. Thank you for watching Heart Touch Stories. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, share it forward, and keep choosing kindness, even when no one's looking.